Abracadabra, an unpublished work by Bailey A. Osborne. Chapter 5. Exploration. The action of traveling in or through an unfamiliar area in order to learn about it. A thin layer of ice covered the windows of the shop. Inside, Abra sat with her scarf still wrapped around her neck and a thin blanket tucked around her legs. In Stellan's office, her brother sat in a t-shirt, his cheeks flushed from the warmth of the heating system. While his insulated office retained the heat in a way that almost made it unbearable for the young man, the shop never felt warm. Gusts of snowy wind constantly blew in around the door, and frost painted icy pictures on the large windows. With only one weekend left before Christmas, Abra decided to start making a list that outlined the shop's income for that year. Starting with January, Abra took her time, writing down names and amounts, frowning as she reached June and saw she only had 14 sales, with 5 unique customers. She hadn't noticed how infrequently she actually closed a sale. Sitting back, Abra's heart stung a little. The shop had been her responsibility, entrusted into her care by Stellan. To see how badly she had done made her cheeks go hot with shame. How could she expect to be treated as a 23-year-old when she failed like this? Taking a deep breath, Abra continued. She would have to change things in the coming year if she wanted to pretend like she contributed to the family outside of the house. Where did the money come from to pay their bills and buy their groceries? If Abra's monthly income barely scratched $50, what were they living off of? Oh yeah, Stellan has a job. Abra shook her head, feeling silly. How could she forget such a normal detail? For a moment, Abra thought about closing the work laptop and ignoring the task, but she squared her shoulders and forged ahead. As she worked, though, she felt that old, familiar, hopelessly stuck feeling that gnawed on the edges of her mind. Everyone around her seemed to grow up and move on to adult struggles, and she kept going in circles. Making excuses for herself by blaming her illness seemed childish, and she refused to reason it away. 21-year-old Abra had done it, but not anymore. What did her illness have to do with being a bad salesperson? She remembered everything except for the stars. Her illness had nothing to do with this. Going quickly now, Abra wanted to finish and distract herself by reading a book or wrapping presents. She went through August, September, October, November. What? Abra froze. She stared unblinking at the screen and the name she read there. Then she squeezed her eyes shut and opened them. The name hadn't changed or disappeared. Slowly, Abra looked at the next line. Same name. For 5 weeks in a row, the same name appeared. Zan Kimura. Who? Her mouth went dry when she realized the strange name had last been entered only the day before. Every Thursday for a month showed a purchase paid for with a credit card in the name Zan Kimura. She had no memory of this person. Frantically, she combed through the events of the day before. She had organized the toys, stacked books, threw out a pair of leather boots that had become a mouse nest, and closed up early to spend time with Shepard before he left until after the New Year. He would be in Solu for the weekend, and then travel to his parents' home to celebrate the holidays. She had helped him pack and teased him about taking his girlfriend home to meet his parents. Then she had invited him to eat dinner with her and Stellan, but he declined. Whatever had happened between the two men while Abra had been sick still hadn't been resolved. Abra remembered the day before clearly. She had worn her blue sweater that Shepard gave her for her birthday, and had made a thermos of lemon ginger tea to drink at work. Turning around, Abra spotted the thermos, still sitting on the back shelf. See, she told herself, I remember. But then, at 10:09 a.m., she had swiped the card of a man for a charge of $13 and some odd cents. What had he bought? Why did she not remember her only customer of the day? Staring at the name made her stomach hurt. Her immediate thoughts told her to run straight to her brother and tell him her memories had started leaving her again. Beyond the star, she had forgotten a person? Even strangers she barely saw were faces she recognized the second time they passed her window. Every week. She couldn't believe it. He's come every week. Zan Kimura. Abra stood to her feet, letting the blanket tumble onto the floor. She kicked at it to keep herself from tripping and began pacing. She felt her heart racing in her chest and her breaths coming too fast, but she forced herself to calm down. Pressing her hands over her heart, she reminded herself that she was no longer a child. She could try to figure this out. But if I'm the only one here and I don't remember him, how do I figure out what happened? Abra asked the room, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Her eyes rested on the thermos, and she wished the inanimate object could talk. Did you see him? Is he real? Perhaps she had mentioned him to Shepard. Abra glanced at the time and shook her head. Shepard would be halfway to Solu to spend time with his girlfriend. She would only call him if absolutely necessary. Come on, Abra, think, she commanded herself. Next to the thermos sat a stack of books. On the top of the pile, Abra saw her journal from her birthday. She didn't remember writing in it, but maybe she had stuck something between the pages. Quickly, she walked around the counter to the back shelf and picked it up. Saying a quiet prayer under her breath, she opened the first page and read words she had never read before. November 10th. Maybe I'm only stuck because I allow myself to be stuck. What would happen if I let go of the brakes and let myself fly the way I dream of? Abra stared at the entry, confused. Inside her chest, she felt the sharp claws of panic. First, a repeat customer who she had no memory of, and now entries in a journal? She flipped through the first few pages and saw writing on all of them. Why didn't she remember? Closing her eyes, she forced herself to breathe. Clenching her fingers around the book, she compelled herself to not run back to her brother. In the back of her mind, a chilling thought came that perhaps Stellan already knew about these memory gaps. She had to try to figure this out on her own. Opening her eyes, Abra looked at the page again. The date. What had happened on November 10th? Abra didn't have many memories of November because she had been so sick. A thought flashed into her mind, and she gasped at the suddenness of it. Perhaps starting her journal around the same time she had been sick affected her ability to remember it? That made sense and allowed her to breathe a little easier. Quickly, she checked the date of the first time Zan Kimura bought something to see if maybe he fell under the same category. November 21st. Abra read with a disappointed sigh. She turned the page of her journal and saw her second entry from the day in question. Did I write this before or after Zan was here? She wondered. I think perhaps my sickness is worse than I've been told. It makes me feel a little crazy, feeling perfectly fine while seeing my brother look at me like I'm about to fall apart. What happens in the blank spaces of my memory when I don't even realize the blank spaces exist? Do they exist? Or am I actually crazy? Underneath were the scribbled words about having a dream, meeting a stranger who seemed to know her name, and how she had a bruise on the inside of her elbow. The handwriting between the two paragraphs seemed to indicate they had been written at different times in the day. Again, Abra felt confused. Maybe Zan came before the 21st and didn't buy anything. Abra ran her palm across her forehead. I'm assuming the stranger who knew me was him. She remembered the dream, or at least that she had had one. She had dreamed about visiting Solu, and it had been a happy dream. What had she done in the dream? She couldn't remember really since Sergeant Lee's visit last month. Fish. Fish? What about fish? Had she dreamed she ate fish in Solu? Shaking away the thoughts, Abra refocused. So I know he came the first day he bought something. I wrote about him, said Abra, stating what she believed as fact. Flipping to the next page, she read the date, November 23rd. Nothing important, just that Harmony had come to check on her during her workday and had drank lemon ginger tea with her. What about November 28th? Flipping another page, she found it. At the top of the page, in big, bold letters, she had written, Telescopes are so cool! And under had a drawing of a constellation labeled Sagittarius. One star had an arrow pointed at it, with the name Gamma 2 Sagittarii written in pencil. Nothing else had been written on the page, or the next, that just had a list of what she assumed to be names of stars and planets. What is a telescope? Abra groaned in frustration. And why didn't I write about Zan? Did I remember him between the first meeting and the second? She paused. Did the possibility of her not seeing him exist? No. She muttered what a stupid idea that was, and to do better. No one else worked in the shop. If he bought something, they had seen each other. But apparently in the second week he hadn't left any type of impression on her, or at least not one that outweighed her beloved stars. Why have I never thought to journal like a normal person? Abra asked herself, then answered, probably because until now I've always remembered everything I needed to know. After the 28th, her entry stopped until December 1st. She wrote about Shepard and Stellan and how thankful she felt when she thought about all they had done for her. December 5th, the third Thursday, had nothing. The fourth Thursday just had one simple question. Have you ever met someone and thought to yourself, this is the most handsome man I have ever met in my life? Abra's cheeks flushed at her own words. She read it again, trying not to blush. Several words stood out to her. Handsome, most, life, met. She met someone. The most handsome man. She had no memory of it. Abra sat at Shepard's kitchen table in the dark, with 5 printed out receipts in one hand and her journal in the other. For 7 whole minutes she sat, arguing with herself whether or not to go through with it. She could back out now and pretend like she never knew. She could burn the receipts, shelve the journal, and start the new year acting as if nothing had changed. Every day for the past week, Abra had woken up, seen her journal open on her bedside table, and read the note she left for herself. Every day for the past week, she had lived with her older brother and told him nothing. Every day for the past week, she had gone to bed wondering about Zan Kimura just as much as she wondered about the stars. In her astronomy book, she found new clues, yellow post-it notes with handwriting that didn't belong to her, a dog-eared corner on the page about telescopes, a brochure for the planetarium in Solu. Did any of those things have something to do with Zan? Maybe. Mysteries about the stars had always been part of her existence. Strange yet handsome men were new, and she cared more about that. No one showed up at the shop on Thursday. It had been the day after Christmas, and she hadn't expected anyone to, but she wanted to see. She spent the day with Harmony across the street from the shop, sitting in her cinnamon and clove-scented living room and keeping an eye out the window. Now she sat in Shepard's empty house without the lights on, telling herself to just do it. Taking a deep breath and setting her jaw, Abra set down her journal and papers and reached forward through the dark to where she knew Shepard's laptop had been left. Carefully, she lifted the top and felt for the power button. She had used Shepard's laptop with him multiple times and knew how to sign into his account and look up things on the internet. No one had told her she couldn't use Shepard's laptop whenever she wanted, but then again, no one had offered for her to use it without supervision. And then again, she had never cared to use it on her own before. Abra typed in Shepard's password and clicked open a website to look up her supposedly handsome stranger. With slow, deliberate movements, she typed each letter of his name, watching it appear on the screen in front of her like magic. When she finished, she stared at it and watched the cursor blink, reminding her that seconds were passing, and she should stop hesitating. Just do it! Abra hissed at herself. Almost immediately, links appeared for several Zan Kimuras. As quickly as she had allowed her hopes to raise, she felt them fall again. She hadn't thought about what to do if there were multiple options. She only had a name and an adjective to go off of. Stupid, she muttered, and she didn't know if she had aimed the insult at the computer or herself. She sat staring at the screen, unsure of what to do. It felt wrong and anticlimactic for it to all be over just like that. Erasing the name Zan from the search bar, Abra typed in Shepard Lee. Might as well, she said as her friend's public profile appeared in front of her. A little smile crossed her face as she looked over her friend's posts and pictures. He didn't post much, but he had several pictures with a girl named Mina. Clasping her hands over her heart, Abra couldn't help but feel a little giddy at the sight of her friend's happy smile and the way the girl beside him leaned into his embrace. In one picture, Mina gazed fondly at Shepard instead of at the camera. In another picture, Mina wore a blue sweater identical to the one Abra had received as a present for her birthday. She wondered if Shepard had bought one for both of them, or if Shepard had seen Mina's and chosen one for Abra. Curious, Abra clicked on Mina's name to visit her profile. She found a page filled with regular updates about coffee dates and holiday cheer, enjoying her boyfriend and thoughts on the coming year. Some of the pictures of Mina and Shepard were the same as she had found on his profile, but some were different. Clicking through them, Abra soaked in all the warm feelings she could from the sight of her best friend's happiness. Scrolling down, Abra saw that Mina had gone to university for a medical degree and worked in an emergency room in southern Solu. Mina had a picture of her family from childhood, and it showed an older sister and two happy, smiling parents. In a more recent family photo, Abra saw the father missing. She frowned and wondered what had happened. A list of Mina's friends showed up on the left side of the screen, and just as Abra was about to ignore it, the letter X caught her attention. She stared. Zan Kimura. Mina had a Zan Kimura on her friend list. Is this my Zan? Abra hardly dared breathe as she clicked on it and saw a face she had never seen before appear on screen. The serious man in the picture made Abra stare. If she had seen that face before, how could she have forgotten it? The narrow eyes, the high cheekbones and somber set of the mouth. He looked as serious, handsome, and wise as a young man could. Abra stared, wishing she could talk to him. Was this her Zan? Had she found him like this? With a shaking hand, Abra did her best to scroll through the sparse updates. He worked at the University of Solu. He never posted pictures, only articles about the school and events happening there. A poetry reading, an art exhibition, a night to learn about the stars. Abra clicked on the last one and saw Zan's face again. He had hosted the event. Is this you? She went back to his profile and saw one other picture that had been posted a year earlier. Zan's face had a sweet smile that showed two deep dimples as he looked down at a beautiful girl. The girl had a ring on her finger, and her eyes locked on his. They looked happy? Content. Abra found the word she meant. They looked content. Even though Abra couldn't remember her Zan and had no idea what type of connection or relationship they had, she thought that perhaps he had kept coming back because of some romantic attraction. She felt silly for feeling a little disappointed. She didn't even know if the Zan Kimura she found was the right one, but seeing him happily in love felt like a shock. If he didn't have feelings for her, why did he keep coming back? Why had he shown up in the first place? I've just made so many more questions for myself. Abra held her head in her hands and let out a sigh. Using the light of the laptop, Abra picked up her pen and found the next clean page in her journal. Carefully, she wrote down what she had found out from her brief internet search of the name. She would need that information in the morning when she woke up so she didn't forget. Just before she closed the website and turned off the laptop, Abra made an impulse decision. Clicking back to Shepard's profile, she found Stellan's name on his friends list. She chuckled at the fact that her brother had his profile under the name Stellan James, his first and middle name. Abra almost laughed when she saw his picture that popped up. Stellan looked young, younger than Abra had clear memories of. Maybe 15? She would have been 8 then. His face looked young and smooth. Not a trace of worry or anxiety lined his expression as he smiled at the camera. His last post had been from university, 7 or 8 years earlier. There were a few silly things, nonsense things really, that made no sense to Abra, but had probably been an inside joke between friends. His friends list only had a few names on it, one of them being Shepard, but none were anyone named Zan. Abra scrolled a little bit more and found herself at the bottom of the page, the first post. For a moment, Abra thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. She knew both faces in the picture, but not from that long ago. Stellan's teeth glinted with braces that Abra had never known he had, and he had a skinny arm around the narrow shoulders of a slight woman with graying hair and a warm smile on her face. Even though the version of the face Abra knew looked older and the hair had turned completely silver, Abra recognized Harmony. At first the girl didn't understand, but her mind quickly made an explanation. We've lived in the village for my whole life. So has Harmony too, probably. She's always been kind to us, and perhaps she never had children of her own, so she... Abra's thoughts stopped when she saw the caption under the photo. Love you, Grandma. Thanks for letting me stay with you this summer. Ha ha. Only then did Abra notice how Harmony's features matched Stellan's. A little in the eyes, a little in the color of their skin, a little in the way their smiles were higher on the right side of their faces than the left. Without clicking off the picture, Abra shut the laptop and sat in darkness again. She thought back to the day after Christmas and how Harmony had seemed so happy to see her, how the older lady had brought her cups of tea and plates of Christmas treats. Abra had hardly paid attention to her stories about growing up in Yotoko as a little girl and following her mother around the fields to pick herbs and flowers to dry. And all along, Abra's mind couldn't even say it. For the last 6 years, Stellan had sworn that they had no living relatives. All they had were each other and the Lee brothers. Abra left Shepherd's home in a daze. She had made it halfway home when she heard the sound of someone shouting her name. Coming to a stop, Abra tried to quiet her heart so she could listen. Her breath came out in frozen puffs of air. She looked around her for a sign that she hadn't been imagining things. Then, from the direction of the field where she often went to stargaze, Abra heard it again. Quickly, Abra ran towards the voice. The next time it called, Abra recognized it as her brother. I'm here, she called, trying to see where he could be. The tall grass and weeds from the summer had died and were crushed under the latest snowfall, but Abra saw no one. Perfect white snow had been trampled by large footprints, and Abra stumbled after them, struggling to see where they had led as they backtracked and doubled around. She looked up and saw herself facing the middle of the empty field. Suddenly, everything felt eerie. Stellan? She shouted, her voice coming out high-pitched with panic. Behind her came the sound of heavy footsteps, but before she could turn around, she felt strong arms wrapped around her from behind. She gasped, but didn't push away when she caught the familiar scent of her brother. He had found her. She was safe. Where were you? He turned her to face him, holding her by both shoulders. His eyes were wet and worried, and he could hardly catch his breath from running so hard. Why didn't you tell me you were leaving? I'm sorry. Abra didn't understand his reaction. It had been quite some time since she stopped telling him when she left to go look at the stars, or find a book that she had left at the shop. He had never cared, or seemed to notice before. I was just... You can't do that, Abra! I was so worried! Stellan's voice broke as he hugged her against him, crushing her face against his jacket, and holding the back of her head with a trembling hand. You can't do that to me! You can't do that! Abra tried to speak, but with her mouth pressed against his jacket, all that came out were muffled sounds. Don't ever leave without telling me. Stellan pulled back again and looked her straight in the eye. Tears were streaming down his face in a way Abra didn't think she had ever seen before. Okay? Yes. Abra nodded, unable to take her eyes off her brother's tears. Only after Abra promised did Stellan release her and wipe his eyes. He kept his hand over his face and let out an exhale that sounded like a groan. Standing quietly, Abra said nothing. She knew she was precious to her brother, but she had never seen him this upset over her before. Once Stellan dropped his hands, he shoved them into the pockets of his coat. He nodded at Abra to start walking. Let's go home, he said, his voice still rough from crying. Abra followed him, not sure what to say as the silence around them filled with awkward tension. At the front door, Stellan let out another deep breath, this one less of a cry. He put a hand on Abra's shoulder and gave her a weary smile. I didn't mean to worry you, said Abra in a small voice. I know. Stellan gave her shoulder a squeeze. Just don't know what I would do if I ever lost you. I can't get lost here. Abra let herself give a little laugh. It's impossible to get lost in Yotoko. Good. Stellan didn't say anything else, just opened the door for them and shut it behind them. Wanting to do what she could to calm her brother's nerves, Abra went immediately into the kitchen and brewed him some tea. She read Harmony's handwriting on her recipe card for chocolate chip cookies and thought about how she had a grandmother. Instead of working in his room, Stellan sat down in the chair in the living room and turned on the television. They didn't have many channels, but sometimes they could catch old movie reruns or nature documentaries. Someone with an Australian accent stood in front of the camera talking about kangaroos. From the kitchen, Abra kept an eye on her brother as he sipped his tea. Between her palms, she rolled the cookie dough into balls. She placed each ball onto the cookie sheet and slid the pan into the oven. While the cookies baked, she sat on the couch and watched TV with Stellan. When the cookies finished, she sat with him and ate them, laughing over the comedy show that had started playing next. The laughter did them both good, and Abra could tell that Stellan felt better by the time they said good night. "See you in the morning," he said, giving her another quick hug. "Good night," she said, waiting until he closed his bedroom door. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, where her glow-in-the-dark stars hung in patterns she could never remember the names of. She thought about Harmony and her dumpling soup. She thought about Harmony and how she had taught Abra how to make lemon ginger tea to stay warm and boost her immune system. She thought about Harmony and how she always invited Abra in for as long as she wanted whenever Abra knocked on her door. For a while, Abra tried to come up with reasons as to why no one told her that Harmony was her grandmother. Nothing made sense. Why have her in their lives if they were going to only act like neighbors? Had she done something wrong? Had they? How come no one told Abra when she woke up without her memories that she had more than just a brother and a friend? And would she remember in the morning? Or would everything be gone again? Abra sat up to write things down in her journal, but when her hand went to the bedside table, she felt nothing. Only then did she remember. She had left her things at Shepherd's house.